Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to dive into the fascinating history of a neighborhood that was literally forged by resistance. We're taking a trip to Athens, Greece, to explore this really incredible intersection of history, politics, and modern urban identity. But to truly grasp the complex reality of this place as it stands today, we've got to rewind a bit and look at exactly how it all began. So I really want you to keep this central question in the back of your mind as we go through this today. How did a 50-year-old political uprising physically shape the culture of modern Athens? I mean, it's incredibly rare to see a single historical event anchor the modern identity of an entire city district so deeply, but as you'll see, that's exactly what happened here. Okay, let's take a quick look at our roadmap for today. We're going to start with the 1973 Polytechnic Uprising, then we'll break down the 4 days of defiance, explore the legacy and the myths, jump forward to Exarchia Square today, and finally wrap up with clashes, gentrification, and books. All right, part 1, the 1973 Polytechnic Uprising, and the roots of resistance under the junta. To really understand the neighborhood today, we first have to travel back to Greece under the authoritarian military junta, often called the regime of the colonels, which ruled the country from 1967 to 1974. By early 1973, tensions were absolutely boiling over. Law students and anarchists started going on strike against forced military conscription, and this sparked a massive youth anti-dictatorial movement. Now, the crucial thing to know here is that brutal police crackdowns on these early protests didn't stop the movement. They actually radicalized the youth even further, which completely set the stage for a massive and pretty much inevitable confrontation. Moving right along to Section 2, 4 Days of Defiance and the November Escalation. Okay, so this is the inciting incident, the explosive events of November 1973 at the National Technical University of Athens. You can see on this timeline just how rapidly things escalated from a student strike into a full-blown revolt. On November 14th, students spontaneously occupied the campus, and anarchists pushed for a long-term strike. Literally the very next day, thousands of everyday citizens poured into the area to support them, while pirate radio broadcasts were pleading for solidarity. By the 16th, things get intense. Central roads are closed, Molotov cocktails are being thrown. And then, on November 17th, the military intervenes, and they send an actual AMX-30 tank crashing straight through the front gates of the Polytechnic. As they were barricaded inside during all this, the students started calling themselves the Free Besieged, and this powerful 3-word rallying cry, bread, education, liberty, became the absolute defining slogan of their entire struggle. Now, you might assume everyone inside the campus was perfectly united, right? Well, actually, it was a pretty complex web of different factions. The occupation itself was largely driven by newly formed Greek anarchist groups alongside the general student body. But surprisingly, traditional Marxist and pro-Soviet student groups initially kept their distance. In fact, the communist youth of Greece actually tried to expel the anarchists. They labeled them provocateurs because they were out there demanding things like the total abolition of the state and sexual freedom. So yeah, it was a highly dynamic and somewhat fractured coalition inside those gates. So how did they actually get their message out? Well, the students did something incredibly resourceful. Using just laboratory equipment, they managed to set up a pirate radio transmitter. And it was these exact broadcasts, pleading for solidarity over the airwaves, that completely electrified the citizens of Athens into coming out and joining the uprising. Honestly, it was a total masterclass in grassroots communication under an authoritarian regime. Let's jump to Section 3, Legacy and the Myths. Time to separate some fact from fiction. The brutal end to the uprising obviously sparked massive political shifts, but as with any major historical event, it also generated decades of persistent myths. Thanks to some really painstaking research by the National Hellenic Research Foundation, we can actually see how verified facts contrast sharply with early exaggerations. The verified reality is that 24 civilians were killed outside the campus, with over 1,000 injured. But notice this, 0 deaths were confirmed inside the campus itself. However, immediately after the event, rumors wildly exaggerated the death toll, with some claims saying up to 450 people were dead, or circulating stories that the tank had literally run over students, which wasn't the case. And speaking of how easily misinformation can take root, get a load of the Ilenia hoax. There was this famous sketch of a supposed tragic victim named Ilenia, and it really moved the nation at the time. Well, it turned out to be a complete fraud. The image was actually traced back to a magazine advertisement featuring a New Zealand shampoo model. No way, right?
But this was actually incredibly damaging because it gave dictatorship apologists a convenient talking point, allowing them to try and dismiss the very real casualties as just the myth of the Polytechnic.
But setting those myths aside for a second, the genuine legacy of the uprising was monumental. I mean, it acted as a major catalyst for the fall of the junta the very next year in 1974. Crucially, it sparked a massive revival of anarchism in Greece, causing a permanent break between the youth and traditional leftist parties, and giving birth to a new, fiercely anti-authoritarian spirit. Now, it also had a darker legacy, directly inspiring the creation of the far-left terror group known as Revolutionary Organization 17 November, which was named, of course, after the exact day the tank crushed through the gates. Which brings us to Section 4, Exarchia Square Today, the Spatial Legacy. So, let's fast forward to the present day and see how this very specific 1973 political identity found a permanent, physical home. Enter Exarchia Square. This is literally where the anarchist and anti-establishment spirit of 1973 lives on today. It serves as the absolute epicenter for modern political resistance and anti-authoritarian organization in Athens. But as we all know, physical spaces change, and Exarchia is currently in the middle of a massive and pretty contentious transformation. For over a century, this beautiful 1909 Three Loves sculpture decorated the square, serving as a real historical anchor until September 2022. But then, it was removed to make way for the construction of a new Metro Line 4 station. And this has sparked intense ongoing protests. The politically active community there sees this not just as standard urban development, but as a deliberate, state-sponsored gentrification project designed to physically destroy their gathering spaces and price out the very culture that defines the neighborhood. Okay, our final section, Part 5, Clashes, Gentrification, and Books, the Duality of Exarchia. To really wrap your head around this neighborhood today, you have to look at its unbelievable paradox. It is simultaneously a battleground and a utopia. On one hand, you've got heavy police crackdowns, raids on local occupations, and violent clashes over public spaces like Struffy Hill. Yet literally right next door, you find a booming, peaceful community built entirely around literature. Exarchia is famous for its thriving ecosystem of independent bookstores, offering highly specialized knowledge and preserving a deeply communal, independent set of values. I think this quote just hits the nail on the head. Underneath the gritty, riotous, sometimes heavily policed exterior lies a deeply committed intellectual community that fiercely nurtures its own ecosystem. The dedication of the people working in these bookstores totally reflects that exact same passion for education and liberty that the students were chanting for all those years ago in 1973. So, as we wrap up this explainer, here's what I want to leave you with. We've just seen how the defiance of the 1973 Polytechnic uprising didn't just fade away into some textbook. It actively forged the DNA of the Exarchia neighborhood, creating a space that is still fighting for its identity 50 years later. Now, I want you to look around your own neighborhoods. Ask yourself, how might past struggles, strikes, or uprisings be secretly shaping the culture of the streets you walk every single day? What legacy is built into your city's concrete? Thank you so much for joining me to explore this incredible slice of history today. Keep learning and keep looking closer at the world around you.